welcome to my first video on drawing from imagination. This is drawing without any photo references, and ordinarily when I do this I will do it in ink first, and that's because I was influenced several years ago. I think it was 2015 when I first came across Kim Jung-gi, and by 2016 I'd started to draw without a pencil, under drawing, and with less reference, and trying to make better observations really. So in this drawing I kind of combine some of my knowledge of portraiture from just, doing exercises, whether it be going to portrait drawing classes where you're among other people who, even if they're not talking about what they do, if you get to see their work, it can be enough to try and notice, look at your work and look at their work to see, what's better and what's missing in yours. I did a lot of that to try and learn from people who I thought, I really admired their work. And in this drawing, I combine that with things that I've learned from watching Peter Draws as well. Has anyone seen him on YouTube? He's great. And he does a lot of, just shapes and patterns and things which look like things but aren't really things, they just kind of have a suggestion of a shape and a form, which I suppose all drawing and painting is, but it's not even guided towards that. And I think that's quite nice when you have that sense of, I think it's called pareidolia or pareidolia or something like that, where it's, you have this, projected image that you can do into different parts of abstract marks. And I'm quite into doing that for a short period of time, and then guiding some of those marks that make these abstract forms, like just little dashes like I'm doing here, and then starting to guide those towards a certain perspective. So if I'm coming down the drawing, which is what I'm doing here, all of the curls curl downwards, if you know what I mean, so it suggests that it's coming down. Just basic things like that, to remember to apply them to everything, or as much as you can. That's a big part of that. And sorry for the video going blurred here. I really don't notice when it's in or out of focus. There we go, it's popped back into focus. It's so some of this, now I start to apply bits of black to certain areas. There's already parts which I don't like this bit here, because it's not symmetrical and it's not leading to anything structural. So if I break it up as a shape, I find it more interesting and put other shapes around it to sort of mask the weaker elements, and it just doesn't look as prominent as it was. It was a weird sort of, almost like a capital T shape, a weird sort of shape that I just ended up drawing. To a certain extent, I let that happen because I feel like you can come up with quite interesting bits and bobs there, but it is worth noting afterwards what worked and what didn't, and what traps you fall into. And it can lead to second guessing yourself. I feel like I do that at the moment, and I do need to consciously make a kind of mental inventory, or even written, but I very rarely write things down, and if I do, I don't really consult them very often. So maybe just a mental note of things which I didn't like about this drawing and older drawings. Now I made a bold, large mark there that you can see it, the big spiky one, it's about central. And I thought, if I make a big decision like that, then I've got to start building something. So I start to draw a face, and because I've done such a narrow gap between the top of this furry part at the top of the head and the eyes, then it suggests that you're looking from a really low angle. So I start to, really force some of the features of the face towards that perspective, really, that kind of vantage point that you're putting yourself in. So it means drawing underneath the chin, which is quite tricky, but I just kind of got lucky here. I've got, tons of examples where that didn't turn out so well. Just look at my Instagram account, really. I post pretty much everything. And on this occasion, it's kind of balanced enough to, look like underneath the chin. I could kind of get away with that at the moment. I mean, it obviously needs a lot more tone or suggested marks and hatching to indicate parts of the you know, the depth around the neck. And I don't really get into that here. I'm just trying to add as many details as possible. And this video is going to be part of several sessions that I do, that each of them are, I think, about an hour long, because I'm listening to a podcast usually. If it were, you know, drawing with a marker or something, I'd probably put headphones in so that, you know, because it makes quite nice sounds. And if it's in, you know, on good paper or something where it's nice to have playing whilst you draw along, because I know that I like videos where it's just the sound of mark making, just to get you in that mindset of drawing yourself. It's worth playing around with some of these things. If you can draw faces and you get stuck at certain parts, you can either draw bits of this, you know, mutation, which I'm drawing here, or you can battle your way through. And I feel like I've battled my way through where this is now a choice to do this stuff, as opposed to not knowing how to draw it. I mean, I've got loads to learn still about how to draw it, and if I did draw something, it would be trying to come up with design on the spot. That's part of the thing with this exercise, really, is you learn how to vary your design shapes, so that if you are making some kind of clothing or costume for a character, you'll immediately know that you've done certain things and you've done other things, and certain things that you've tried work and certain others don't. This one was a bit more based on the sort of, what is it? It's kind of, is it Greek mythology at the moment, which seems to be creeping into more superhero things that are out. So loosely based on an influence of some kind of more tribal culture, influencing a, what would you call it? A kind of, not an apparel so much as the just the attire, the kind of yeah, the kind of more modern sci-fi twist on clothing and status, you know, accessories like necklaces and things, where you can try and say this is going to suggest a certain time period. So I was, I suppose, trying to get somewhere in between a tribal culture and a sci-fi time period, really. And then mixing that up a little bit as well, because I like some of the things that I learned from drawing, what's it called, steampunk. That's fun, because that's mashing things together, as you know. So with having Victorian influence mashed together with sci-fi, but using that as like steam engine technology to run it, makes me inclined to incorporate, you know, buckles still, even if it is sci-fi, just buckles and buttons and things which are, you know, quite nice, as suggesting an age where that was part of the clothing, and putting it into a place where you wouldn't expect it can be, you know, some of those things that are really nice to look at in other people's work and designs. So I try to incorporate it in my own, but without looking at that. I mean, I know that you're supposed to look at people's work to get references, but I've always been quite hesitant of that. And whenever I have looked at someone's work, I end up just doing a study of their work, really, as opposed to lending from much that they've done, because it would feel, it's not like it'd feel like a cheat, like I'm stealing from them, because it's not as though I'm going to sell loads of copies of their artwork. It's more the case of I wouldn't have learned anything or gained anything by just taking it and not acknowledging it as a master's study or a direct lift off someone, where I feel like it'd be worth just noting, you know, just making honestly like a little note at the side saying, you know, necklace taken from so-and-so, which it isn't. None of this is referenced anywhere. There's probably influence from all sorts of places, but there's nothing specific that I'm tapping into as far as I'm aware. I'm trying to be as much my own characters, my own drawing, and my own kind of ideas as possible, to see what that looks like, and to see if I can, you know, start to develop more of a world, because I know that I've done certain small amounts of that. This is a mistake that I make, because I'm obviously hesitating a bit to draw a hand, because it's always worth giving yourself a moment if you haven't thought about it. And I hadn't really. So when I did that, I'd drawn the curtains, and it just doesn't look right because the fingers would come across the curtains, but the thumb wouldn't. So I start moving the curtains, and eventually I just cut the thumb out of it by drawing a strip past that, because it just doesn't look right, curled out. I imagined it looking right, but when you draw it, sometimes you've just got to hide these mistakes. And that's one of the things that I did learn from watching Kim Jung-gi in person, was that he'd make mistakes. It's not that he wouldn't make mistakes, but he'd just know how to hide them and incorporate them into the design, get a quick fix as soon as possible. I mean, there was a whole, I think it was the whole face and head of a character that he started that at some point had just got smudged, big black smudge all over it. So all of that detail was gone. Well, suggested detail, because a lot of his stuff is just suggestions with tone, really cleverly used. But all of that had gone with this big black smudge, and he just quickly covered it up. I think it became a shadow for something, obviously, because that's what the black areas are going to indicate. And just, you know, knows how to fix it. And getting out of problems, I think, is one of the most important lessons, because learning how to do things well is great, but when they go wrong, if you don't know how to climb out of that hole that, you know, you found yourself digging, and you won't even know you've been digging a hole. That's how I've experienced it anyway, is that you're just happily drawing or painting away, and then it's too late. For example, I did that with watercolour early on in, I say early on, for me it's early on, it's something like 2015 when I did that, I think, or maybe it was, no, maybe it was after that actually, maybe 2016 or 17 or something. But I'd gone out painting with watercolour, and I have no experience with watercolour as far as how to actually use it. I didn't at the time, I have more now. And I'd gone to the end of a pier and started to paint looking from the end of a pier back at the town, and it was all going well. I was terrified, you know, but it was all going well until I'd made the mountains too dark, because there was mountains behind the town. And as soon as you've done that, you've kind of made a bit of an error, which you can fix, but I just had no idea that it was an error at the time. I just knew that it wasn't shaping up like I imagined or as it looked, and I didn't know how to fix it. And now I know that it's, you know, if you make something too dark, you've got to adjust everything to make that not look as dark. Or not necessarily everything, but the right things to make that dark mountains become light again. And to be fair, the mountains should be having a very soft edge against the sky, really, because there's not really a sharp edge very often, depending on what your vantage point is for the mountains, you know. I could be wrong there, I don't know. But yeah, and for this part of the drawing, I think I've kind of got as much done in this session as I'm happy with. So I'm just doing bits of decorative strings of this gloopy mutation stuff. One of the influences that I think of with this stuff is Tetsuo, the Iron Man, a Japanese film. I can't remember when it's from, actually. I should look that up. But yeah, Tetsuo the Iron Man is an influence on some of these more, you know, sci-fi monster looking stuff. Let's see, it's a 1989 film, Tetsuo the Iron Man. I love it. It's weird, don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm saying I recommend it, but I certainly enjoy it. By Shinya, is it Tsukamoto? Tsukamoto, I think. Shinya Tsukamoto. 1989 film, Tetsuo the Iron Man. Things like that, because it's, you know, just, it's just kind of a guy that's going through this weird mutation in the film. It's sort of incorporating mechanical aspects into organic forms, and not what you usually are facing in many films, unless you're watching, you know, a David Cronenberg film or something where it's unusual, it's an art film or something. So, and that's what Tetsuo the Iron Man is. The reason I watched it was because I had, you know, been into Akira when I was young. I saw that when I think I was 13 or 12 or something. Absolutely loved it. And And then I saw Tetsuo not long after, because the name of one of the characters in Akira is Tetsuo. And I wasn't disappointed with what I saw, even though it's not related at all. So Katsuhiro Otomo is another inspiration for, just drawing, to be honest. I think I'd be less inclined if I hadn't seen such beautiful work. And I don't know, I suppose it's because I didn't really draw as much that I started to regain my interest in drawing at a late age through people who reminded me of the Katsuhiro Otomo stuff that I was into when I was young. And that was a combination of Kim Jong-gi, and a lot of people on Instagram, to be honest. I've found some really interesting people that I've not heard of before. I don't know how I'd come across them without a platform like that. I used to love Instagram, and it was much easier and nicer to use when I initially started using it. I suppose that's everyone's experience with an app when it starts changing. But at the moment I'm just kind of doing a post and get off there as quick as possible, unless I come across something that catches my eye. At the moment, all I'm doing is I'm trying to add a light halftone to the background, because I know that I've left gaps for this reason, so that there can be something behind the character. And what I'm thinking is that this light halftone, on my next session, I'm going to go in and darken certain parts of it to suggest things in the background and see how that works. And the character will become darker, and in certain areas anyway, I'll use fine liners. Probably this pen, which I'm using at the moment, it's just a dye-in 0.5 Staedtler fine liner, and the brush pen that I was using was a Staedtler Unipin brush pen. So it's more of a nib. It's a really forgiving brush pen, but I really like it, and I like the look of the ink as well, which the Staedtler can be not quite so black, but the brush pen is quite a nice black ink. And I wasn't disappointed with how the background came out. I thought that it might not work at this point, so I think I sit back a little bit here and go, am I making a mess? And then I think, no, if I continue with it, because it's all vertical lines, that appeals to me for an image, because it really flattens the background. And I don't think there's any other vertical hatching in any other part of the drawing. It's all either on an angle or it's contoured in some way. So for the time being, that's where I get up to. And I'm looking forward to continuing on the other faces of the box and touching up the character. And I just hope I don't make a mess of it, because it's easily done. But I don't spend any time thinking about this when I'm not drawing it. It's just I'm working on other things, and then I'll pick it back up when I feel like I've neglected it. And this one I've been working on for longer than I should. I'm going to start trying to speed this up and really get some more videos on this YouTube channel, because I think that if people do get any benefit out of learning to draw from imagination based on what I've learned, then I'd love to be able to offer any kind of tips or perspectives or exercises that might help. But that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then watch another. I've got a series on a 15-minute drawing from memory, but I will be doing another episode of this, as if not more than one. So